Here comes the Space Force. Now, last week, Vice President Pence basically laid out the steps for establishing a new branch of the military called the Space Force, right? Which was, of course, totally not a random idea from the President of the United States that creates an entire branch of the military on a whim for pretty much no good reason. Of course, they would never do something like that. It's a totally serious idea from a totally serious president. So let me give you the details here. And I don't have the video, but according to CNN, Vice President Pence called Thursday, that's last week, for the establishment of a Space Force by the year 2020. That's not far away. Now, of course, that would take an act of Congress to be able to pass the authorization for a new military branch. So by 2020, I don't know if they can actually pull that off. Nonetheless, that's what they want to do. They also announced immediate steps by the Department of Defense and how it would take to, or what they would do to reform how the military approaches space. Space. Because we need a Space Force, apparently. Pence said, our administration will soon take action to implement these recommendations with the objective of establishing the United States Department of the Space Force by 2020. Now, some of their argument, of course, is that, you don't understand, we need a Space Force to protect ourselves against China and Russia. Oh, that's fun. So we need our Space Force to defend against Russia, right? But what we're going to do, and this is something that's sort of related, we're going to block money that would have gone to securing our elections against Russia or China or even domestic hackers. We're not going to do that, but we're going to do the Space Force. Lovely. Fucking genius, man. Now, Pence continues. He says, today the Department of Defense will release a report outlining the first stages of our administration's plan to implement the president's guidance and turn his vision into reality. Did I mention that this was created on a whim? Like, I don't know. We do a lot of work in space. And, then I thought maybe we should create a Space Force. Well, I wasn't really serious, but, then I thought, great idea. This is what we're going off of when it comes to creating a Space Force. Yeah, okay. Wow. Now, he said that the report identifies concrete steps that our administration will take to lay the foundation for a new department of the Space Force. So here are the details. The report calls for a new creation of the new major unified combatant command called U.S. Space Command, which would be akin to the operational commands that oversee U.S. troops in the Middle East and the Indo-Pacific, right? Officials say that the new command will likely incorporate existing space-focused organizations, such as the Air Force's Space Command, which oversees some of 30,000 military and civilian personnel, and which is headquartered at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado. So here's the thing about that. We already have different branches of the military that have space operations. Why do we need a redundant program? It makes no sense. No, we're going to take all these, and here's the trick that they're using. We're going to take all these different branches, we're going to stick them into one giant Space Force. Problem is that they're actually not going to, yes, if they consolidate that into one and then eliminate all the other departments, okay, maybe that makes a little bit more sense, but that's not what they're going to do. And I'll get to that in a minute. Now, the report also calls for a creation of a space operations force of career space experts who are trained, promoted, and retained as space warfighting professionals, which would include engineers, scientists, intelligence experts, operators, and strategists. So, now the Pentagon's report, and I mentioned earlier, right, how you're going to need an act of Congress to get this through. Well, apparently members of Congress are incredibly happy about this. In fact, you have Mike Rogers of Alabama and Democratic Representative Jim Cooper of Tennessee, who's the chairman and ranking member of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Strategic Forces, together saying, "We are glad the Pentagon is finally taking these steps and enhancing our space strength." They said, "This report is a step in a multi-year process that we think will result in a safer, stronger America." So here's the funny thing about this, right? Now, these Republicans, and apparently this Democrat, bipartisan, right? There's always one. They support the Space Force, but these Republicans specifically don't support NASA. Why is that? Well, here's the thing. NASA does science. NASA talks about climate change. Oh, well, that would be the reason. Republicans don't believe in climate change. But what they do believe in is war. They love the idea of militarizing space further. Now, I understand, trying to defend our satellites against Chinese or Russian attack and things like that. I get that, right? So we already have existing branches within existing military branches, right? That deal with that stuff, that kind of thing. We don't need a brand new one. Okay. All this is more money for the donors. This is more money for defense contractors. And this is what bothers me here, right? We just recently passed a gigantic increase to the defense budget, Defense Department, right? To the tune of billions of dollars. Now we spend over $700 billion on the military now. Instead of using that money for free college, for infrastructure, which right now it's falling apart, or healthcare, single payer, Medicare for all we did was just give more money to the military, which is bloated as it is. And now they're using it to develop a space force. One taxpayer watchdog group said the potential and cost and duplication of a space force is a concern. This is Stephen Ellis, Executive Vice President of Taxpayers for Common Sense, says, quote, if we create a whole new branch of the military, the Space Force Secretary would also have attendant staff and overhead, plus dozens of generals, officers, and staff. Except, here's the thing. We already have the Air Force Space Command, while the Navy and Army already have their own space-related operations. Now, of course, the argument here is, yeah, but they're going to get rid of those duplicative agencies. Well, Ellis comes in and he says, history indicates that isn't likely that the Pentagon will get rid of redundancies. So now we're going to have a Space Force, and then we're going to have all these other duplicative agencies within, right? Within the different branches of the military. So overall, we're just spending more to give more money to defense contractors. Ellis said in a statement, quote, when Army Air Forces returned to the Air Force in 1947, it's not like other services quit their aviation components. And how would a space force work with NASA? Well, it probably wouldn't work with NASA. And when asked about the cost, Deputy Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan said that he did not know how much the proposed Space Force would actually cost, but said it could potentially run into the billions. We don't have that cost estimation yet. This is not I would assume it's billions of dollars. Now, here's the thing about this, right? I'm a nerd. I'm a dork. I love space exploration. This is not exploration. This isn't science. This is defense contractors using space to get rich. That's what this is about. This is about shoveling more money to the military. In fact, General Mattis, he was against this at first, right? And then as soon as Congress, bipartisan, Congress voted to increase the Defense Department budget and give more money to the military, now Mattis is like, oh, you know what? Good thing. I'm in favor of the Space Force now, because now we got more money to work with. Yay! That's what this is, right? Now look, basically this is defense contractors getting more and more and more money. And look, we should be working with other nations to better explore space and develop technologies in space that can be used to help people on Earth and continue scientific endeavors, and not turn space into a battlefield. That's what I don't want. I actually want more of a Star Trek future. This is not that, okay? And so in lieu of that, I would rather see free college, rebuilding of our infrastructure, by the way, Flint still does not have clean water, and single-payer healthcare, Medicare for all, instead of the boondoggle that we're going to have with the Space Force. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.